Hello, welcome back. Today I'll be going through tutorial 3 of the Operation Crimson Stone box set. Now this tutorial will start to introduce some other more common rules and skills and equipment that you will find in your games of Infinity. So tutorials 1 and 2 were basically just to give you the core mechanics of the game and the understanding of how to play the game. And tutorial 3, 4 and 5 will introduce more common aspects more common fundamentals and mechanics of the game in Infinity. Okay, so we'll cover off some new skills and equipment that you'll find for this tutorial. So what you'll commonly find in some miniatures in Infinity is they'll have a skill. It's an automatic skill and it's called mimetism. Now this basically just represents the miniature's ability to be more difficult to see and hit on the battlefield. So any miniature that has in their profile mimetism, it will require a negative modifier to the attacker's ballistic skill or discover skill. So the two options are mimetism -3 or mimetism -6. So if your opponent was to shoot at your miniature with mimetism, they will add an additional -3 or -6 to their BS attack. And this does not apply to any close combat attacks against the miniature. Okay, the new piece of equipment to help counter effects of mimetism and camouflage is the multispectral visor. And there are 3 levels, and it's basically designed to help counter the camouflage and mimetism rules in the game. So the most basic level, the lowest level, is multispectral visor level 1. Now this is automatic, so it applies to the miniature all the time. So what the MSV level 1 does is that it allows the mimetism -3 and the low visibility zones, which will be discussed in a much later tutorial. It reduces it from -3 down to -0. Any mimetism -6 or poor visibility zones will be reduced from -6 to -3. And it allows the miniature to draw line of fire through 0 visibility zones, applying a -6 modifier to any skill that requires line of fire. So that's normally like the smoke grenades that get thrown around. Normally the smoke grenades prevent people from shooting through it, but if you have a multispectral visor, it allows you to shoot through it, but obviously at a -6 to that ballistic skill attack. And troopers with this piece of equipment do not make face-to-face rolls against weapons using smoke ammunition. So if someone throws a smoke ammunition and decides to move through it, you get to do a normal roll, targeting that miniature moving through smoke. Okay, MSV level 2, pretty much similar to level 1, except that all mimetism and visibility zones are reduced to 0. So those that had a -6 modifier are now reduced to 0. So you don't apply a -6 to your ballistic skill when you're shooting at the opponent. It also allows you to draw line of fire through 0 visibility zones. This time without a -6 modifier, you just get a shoot straight through the smoke. And again, it allows you to not make face-to-face rolls against smoke ammunition. MSV level 3, probably the rarest visor out there, but it's one of the most powerful. So basically it reduces all mods down to 0. You can again draw line of fire through 0 visibility zones. Again, not make face-to-face rolls against smoke weapons. If you're using Discover against a camouflage target, the MSV level 3 means you automatically discover that target. So you don't have to pass a whip roll using Discover. You just say, I declare Discover, and you automatically get to see that camouflage target, so they have to replace it with a miniature. And it also allows you to ignore the surprise attack mods from camouflaged markers when they attack your miniatures. So basically here's just a summary overall. MSV level 1, as stated, partially counters mimetism. It's only mimetism down to -3 for the more serious ones. Otherwise, -3 goes down to 0, and it can attack through smoke with a -6 modification to the ballistic skill. multispectral visor level 2 obviously counters all levels of mimetism, and you can attack through smoke with no modification to your ballistic skill. And multispectral visor level 3, same as levels 1 and 2, but you can also automatically discover your rolls. So you'll never fail them, you'll always see the camouflage person. Okay, camouflage. Now this is a a skill, and it can also be a marker state for your miniatures. Okay, so how to use the camouflage marker. So you can use it during your deployment phase, and basically you don't have to deploy your miniature on the table, you can just deploy the camouflage token. And if you have a trooper that is deployed as a miniature, to go into the camouflage state, you must spend an entire order skill and be outside of the line of fire of the enemy markers or troopers. So once you're in the camouflage state, what does this mean? We can just place a camouflage token, not the miniature. Now it's separate to the mimetism skill, because the mimetism just makes it harder to be hit at or to shot at. So camouflage just means you have to be discovered first before it can be shot at, whereas mimetism, even if you are discovered, you still have that extra ability of being more difficult to shoot at. And that can work in conjunction with the camouflage. So the mimetism essentially will apply to the discover rolls and the BS rolls, but the camouflage just means you have to be found first before you can be shot at. So as it says, you cannot declare attacks against a camouflage marker. It is necessary to discover that marker first, unless otherwise specified by rule or skill. So if you had a multispectral visor, that will change that rule, like MSV level 3. Otherwise, in order to attack a camouflage target, you have to first discover that target. And obviously, to discover the marker, you have to roll dice for that in the discover order. And if they have mimetism, then you'll apply those -3 or 6 modifiers to your roll. If your discover roll is successful, then yes, the camouflage marker is replaced with a miniature. Now this is important. If one of your miniatures fails to discover a marker, it cannot attempt to discover the same marker again until the next turn when you're the active player. However, that's only for that miniature. If you have another miniature that can target and discover the camouflage target, well, you can do that. You just can't do it from the same one that failed, because it basically says, they tried to find it, what it was, and they couldn't. So there's no chance to do it again because they failed. But if you had 3 miniatures overlooking a camouflage state, camouflage marker, you might want to do one first, and if that doesn't work, then do another one. If the second one doesn't work, do a third one, and that way it just increases your chance of finding out who it is. So moving around a battlefield in a marker state, you have 360-degree line of fire, not the 180. Obviously, the silhouette value is the same as what the miniature is, so it's silhouette 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. The only AROs that a miniature can declare against a camouflage marker are discover, dodge, lookout, or reset. And lookout and reset can be explained in later tutorials. Now, if you happen to see in your reactive turn, see a camouflage marker, if the opponent declares move as their first short order, just move, you can delay an ARO, because that opponent might declare BS attack and reveal themselves automatically. Otherwise, if not, then you can delay your ARO until the second short movement skill. Now, obviously, to cancel the camouflage state, obviously, when the camouflage marker declares an attack, lookout, or any skill that requires a roll, to go from camouflage token to applying the miniature on the table. If you declare an entire order skill, if you enter silhouette contact or base-to-base contact with an enemy model, then you'll automatically be discovered. The state is cancelled if you are discovered by a successful discover roll from the opponent. If you're forced to make a saving roll, if you have impetuous or your army enters the retreat state, then you'll be replaced with a miniature. And when you do replace your marker with a miniature, then you can choose which direction it is pointing, and everything about that camo token, which was once private information, now becomes public information, except for the lieutenant designation. Okay, so here are just the 3 different types of markers. So this is your first basic camo token for troops with just a camouflage skill. This one here with a -3 means that the miniature here has camouflage skill and mimetism -3. This one here is a camouflage skill, but the miniature has mimetism -6. So even if these troopers are discovered, they still have the mimetism skill as well. Okay, so here's just a quick example of how to use the camouflage skill and mechanic. So obviously, this is the Caliban is the active player. So they declare their first short movement skill as move, and then they move up to reach cover. Now the opponent with the Fusilier is deciding to delay his ARO against the marker because he doesn't know what the marker is going to do yet. Obviously, the active players decided to do a ballistic attack and shoot the Fusilier. And then from there, the Fusilier can decide to ballistic skill attack back in return as his ARO. Now, as previously stated, once the miniature has now revealed itself, it is actually revealed for the entire movement phase. So the opponent gets to choose where to engage that target. So the opponent gets to choose to shoot the active player when he's out in the open and not in cover, but the active player chooses to shoot from cover at the target. I mean, they could shoot from there as well, but it could be because of a benefit to range. Now, as you see here, because the active player was in camouflage state and then decided to attack, the opponent gets a -3 for a surprise attack and -3 for mimetism. And obviously +3 for their range, and the attacking player just gets a normal range and cover modifications. And then the dies are resolved as a normal face-to-face roll. Okay, so surprise attack is pretty much the only time you can use it is when your camouflage token is attacking. And the benefit of the surprise attack is that your opponent applies a -3 or a -6 depending on the unit profile, and that applies to your opponent shooting at your miniature, or even doing something such as a dodge, or if you're hacking a console, and then like your active player is shooting at the opponent's miniature that's trying to do a hack a console in there as a reaction, they'll suffer a -3 to any of the rolls declared for that. Okay, so to help discover camouflage token, this is the range modifier for discovering camouflage token at certain ranges. So it uses the trooper's whip attribute. So basically the trooper's intelligence level. Obviously, like all rolls in Infinity, must be equal to or less than to succeed, and it's just a normal roll. Now, if the trooper cannot discover the camo token, it cannot discover it again to the next player turn. However, if you choose to discover and the enemy chooses to react and shoot back, then that discover roll basically becomes a wasted discover roll. And hopefully that will be displayed in game. And obviously the benefits, if you try to discover anything 8 inches or less, you'll get +3 to your whip. From greater than 8 inches to less than 32, no modification, just your standard flat whip roll. And obviously relevant -3, -6 the further out you choose to discover. Okay, the game and order sequence. So once again, no change as previously. Each round has 2 turns, turn 1 and turn 2, and each, turn 1 is your active player, first active player, and turn 2 is the second active player. And obviously, once again, you get an ARO after the first short skill or short movement skill, but if they're still out of line of fire and the opponent does a second short skill or movement skill, then you do get a chance to have an ARO. Now, something to remember is that if you had the ARO after the first one and you choose not to use it, you cannot get it again after the second one, because you had the opportunity here, but you failed to use it, and so this one cancels this out. The only time that doesn't apply is when it comes to camouflage tokens. You can choose to deliberately delay, because the active player may then declare BS attack or something else, and it may cancel the camouflage state, and then you get to have an ARO. So the only time you get the second ARO is against camouflage tokens if you delay your first one, or you didn't get a chance to have an ARO after the first short skill, and after the second short skill, you have the opportunity to have an ARO because they're now in your line of fire by doing a move, for example. And then once it's all done, you check your ranges, add the required modifications, and make your rolls. So for the tutorial, Discover is a short movement skill. It's added under the short movement skill list, and it's also an ARO. So as an ARO, if your opponent decides to go move and you choose, and they come into your line of fire and you choose to discover, and then they choose to move again, if your discover roll is successful, that means that camouflage token is negated, it's cancelled, and then they have to replace the miniature. And it stays that way because you've discovered that miniature. Even if they've gone from cover to open to cover, and you declared discover whilst they're in the open, and then they made their next movement skill into cover, that miniature will be discovered and have to be put on the table. And as the active player up here, your order sequence, you can choose to do move and discover, because discover is a short movement skill. So move into position, and then discover the opponent's camouflage miniature, or if you are the camouflage or you can choose to discover the miniature and then declare an attack as well. Okay, just the army list for this tutorial. So for the Ariadne unit, they have the Zenit 7 detachment, and obviously they have the surprise attack, camouflage, and mimetism, -3, and that's this miniature here. Okay, and here's just a weapons list, because I'm just doing a different setup for this tutorial. So the rockets, and here's their weapons and the ranges and modifications to all of that. The Volkolak, the heavy infantry, and the the Zenit 7 detachment, AP sniper rifle, and close combat weapon. Okay, for the nomads, their extra miniature for this tutorial is the intruder, and once again it has surprise attack, -3, camouflage, mimetism. We're not worried about these ones, and they also have the multispectral visor level 2. So their mimetism means 0 for this miniature. Once again, the Alguacils, weapon profiles, the Evader, the heavy infantry with a Spitfire close combat weapon, and the Intruder has a HMG close combat weapon. Okay, we'll get into the game. Okay, so for the initiative roll, our lieutenants have both the same whip of 13. As you can see, 5 and 19, I succeeded in my whip roll because I'm the nomad player. My opponent failed because they scored higher than 13. So I choose to keep initiative and go second, and my opponent chooses to keep deployment and deploy second. And once again, I choose to go second because the narrative element of these tutorials is that Ariadne has the advantage. But I won't do that for the last tutorial. That'll be clean slate. Excuse me. Okay, deployment. So I'll deploy my Alguacil here, here, and here, keeping in mind this is my lieutenant option here. And I'll deploy my first camouflage marker. My opponent deploys a rocket there, there, and there, and a camouflage token there. Now, I sort of know what that is because I'm doing the tutorial, but I don't know which one their lieutenant is. And now my reserve trooper goes down, so I'll put my heavy infantry up here, and my opponent does the same here. Now, once again, my opponent is deployed along the extreme edge of their deployment zone because they get the first turn and they want to quickly move into cover and take advantage of the first turn. And these two rockets were in the prone position. So that's my deployment zone there. As you can see, the camouflage marker is up there. And my opponent's deployment zone, camouflage marker there, and obviously in prone in the open, ready to move into cover if need be. Okay, round one. So now we have 5 miniatures on the table. That means 5 regular orders and 1 lieutenant order. The first order is spent. Opponent declares move, and they move the heavy infantry forward. Now I declare nil ARO because I'm actually behind cover and everything. I actually have no line of fire to the miniature, so I can't really declare an ARO. Opponent declares move again, and they move up to here. Second order, once again move up the stairs. Now this is a building, so even though it's hard to see from here, I do not have any line of fire, so I cannot declare an ARO. Now my opponent decides to move again. Now moving up to this edge, it exposes the miniature, and then I do get to declare ARO because I now have line of fire, and I declare ballistic attack for this miniature, and this miniature. So just the ballistic skill data and the range modifiers for the weapon, the cover modifiers, it's all -3 because my opponent is in cover. Because they're up higher and I'm down low, anyone up above gets a cover modifier. And obviously the success value for each roll. So 10, 11, and a 5. Okay, so the first 2 fail, but I get 1 hit from my miniature the furthest away. And I get a success on a 4. Now my weapon for the combi rifle is damage 13. So my opponent rolls a 17. Now the 17 is higher than a 13, so it's an automatic save. Now after that, because you've been hit, you still have to do what's the guts roll, but my opponent chooses to automatically fail the guts roll and take up better cover. So they go prone and move up to 2 inches in a better cover. Yeah, the next order, declare move, and then move the camouflage token up. Now once again, because I'm behind cover, I've no line of fire to that token, so I cannot declare discover. So no ARO. Move again, in the open, again, no ARO because I have no line of fire. Next order, declares move, up to the piece of cover. Once again, still no line of fire to the target. And they just declare an idle because that's where they want to go and they don't want to do anything else. They want to remain camouflaged. Once again, no ARO. Final order, declare move. Now this rocket is no longer prone. So you can only declare prone before the actual movement. You cannot move and then declare prone at the end of it. So by removing the prone token saying they're standing up, that means they can move up to the maximum of 4 inches, which is what they do. Once again, I'm in cover, I can't see. And they declare move again. They decide to go prone this time and then move 2 inches up the stairs. Okay, my turn. Once again, 5 miniatures on the table. Even though I'm in a marker state, I still provide a regular order. First order, declare move, I move my camo token up. Opponent has no line of fire, so they can't do anything. And declare move again. And strange enough, no one has line of fire. Second order, declare move. Now I'll move in base-to-base contact with my opponent's camouflage miniature. So they decide to declare close combat attack because I'm in silhouette contact and that counts as my camouflage state. And I declare CC attack as well. So now we reveal ourselves. That's my intruder and my opponent's Zenith 7. It's me up top, opponent down bottom. Okay, both our CC is actually the same, 14. We roll the die. And my opponent succeeds, I fail. So I have to take an armor roll. Now the damage for a close combat attack is off the unit's physical attribute. So the Zenit has a physical of 10. So I have to make a save against a 10. I roll a 19. I'm above that. I'm successful. Now there's really no such thing as a guts roll. Close combat attacks are pretty much, cutthroat. It's do or die essentially. So I spend another order because I'm still in the engaged state. I can't really break away. Now I can choose to dodge and get out of it, but I don't. I'd rather win the combat, so I choose close combat attack for my short skill. Opponent chooses close combat attack from ARO, and that's pretty much it. Again, same as before, roll the dice. This time my opponent fails, I succeed on a 3. My opponent has to make a save. Now it's against my physical of 12 as the damage. They roll a 9. Now they do get an armor save because they are wearing armor. And so the success value, or the save value, is 11, which is just shy of 12, so they fail. And the miniature goes unconscious. Okay, spending an entire order, I choose to re-enter the camo state because I have no line of fire from my enemy. So I can choose to recamouflage. And because it's entire order, that's what I do for that order. Okay, spending my last order, I decide to get out of dodge, so I choose move, and I move. Again, my opponent cannot see me, no line of fire. Choose move again, get myself back into cover, and no further arrows. Okay, round 2. My opponent has 4 miniatures still remaining on the table, generating 4 orders, including the lieutenant, and plus their lieutenant order. Spending the first order, declare move. The Volculop moves up further, but because it's prone, I cannot see the base, so I have no ARO, and they declare idle. They don't want to do anything else. Spending the next order, declare move. This one decides to stand up and moves up the stairs. Again, I have no line of fire, so no ARO. They declare move again, move up the top of the stairs, and I declare nil ARO, but I was a bit silly because it actually turns out I did have line of fire, but I just made a mistake. And you'll know why, because my opponent declares BS attack, and then I realized, oh wait, I actually could attack back. So they choose to declare an attack against my opponent, my miniature there. And I get down and have a look, and I realize I actually can see the miniature, so I declare BS attack as my ARO. And they choose move, so they go prone again and move up to 2 inches. So because they go prone and move, I still get to shoot at the original point of that movement. So that's where I'm taking the ranges from. So the range is 16 inches exactly. So our BS, respective ballistic skill, range modifiers, cover modifiers. So basically we're rolling on flats. So I get a 1, so I do succeed. However, my opponent gets a 6, which is less than a 10, and it's higher than my 1, so it counts as my 1, and my opponent succeeds. So now I make a save. My opponent's weapon damage is 13. I roll 11, plus 1 for armor, plus 3 for cover, gives me a save of 15, which makes it higher than 13, so I don't take a wound. However, I do have to do a guts roll, and I choose to do a guts roll because I want to keep my model where it is, so I have to roll 13 or less. End up getting a 20, so that's a fail. So I have to move up to 2 inches into total cover, and I'll move back there inside or out in total cover, so I cannot see that miniature and get a line of fire to that miniature. Opponent's last order, declare move, choose to stand up, move down here, and I just choose to declare a BS attack with my heavy infantry, and my opponent does the same to me. Okay, so the range is greater than 16 but less than 24. Respective ballistic skill, modifiers for range, modifiers for cover, success value, I'm rolling on flats, my opponent is rolling on 4 or less. As you can see, my opponent is all above 4, greater than 4, so they miss. I'm under 13 with my 8, so I succeed and get a hit. So my opponent has to make an armor roll, a save roll, against my damage 14 for the Spitfire. They roll a 5, plus 1 for armor, plus 3 for cover, equals 9, and 9 is less than 14, so my opponent takes a wound. My turn. 5 orders, lucky me. First order, declare move. I'll move the camo token up the stairs. Obviously no ARO from my opponent, and move again for my camo token. Next order, move, and I'll move the camo token up to the corner. My opponent chooses to delay the ARO, and I choose to declare a BS attack. So because of that, I'll reveal myself, and I shoot at that miniature up here. And my opponent, because they delayed their ARO, gets the chance to shoot me back. Okay, so the range is greater than 8 inches, but less than 16 inches. Our relative ballistic skill, range modifiers, cover modifiers. Now, because I shot out of a camouflage state, my opponent has a surprise attack, so they get the -3 to their ballistic skill. And because of my mimetism, -3, they also add that to their modification. So I end up shooting on 10s, and my opponent ends up shooting on 4. So you can see here the benefits of having a camouflage token and being very active and aggressive in the active turn confers an extra -6 in total to your opponent's skill. As you can see, 14 is higher than 4, so my opponent misses. However, I succeed with 2 hits, a 6 and a 4. So my opponent has to make 2 saves. My weapon is damage 15 because it's HMG. Now obviously 18 is higher than 15, so that's automatic success. However, the 9 isn't. So we've got to add the +1 for armor, +3 for cover. Gives us a save of 13, only just outside the 15, so my opponent takes a wound. Spend another order, declare move, and I'm basically just setting myself in a position here for the next turn. So I declare idle for this miniature. My next order, declare move again. I'll move this Aguacil into cover so I can be ready to engage anything that happens next turn. My last order, again move, because I realised I should probably keep out in the open so I can get more shots back at the opponent. Once again, same usual, and I declare idle. So now I've put myself in a position to defend my territory. Okay, third and final round. Opponent only has 2 miniatures remaining because that one's unconscious, this one's unconscious, and this one's unconscious, so only 2 orders, and obviously still a lieutenant, so I'm assuming that this one is the lieutenant. So declaring order, they sneak out this one here because it's still in prone state, so it can only move up a total of 2 inches, but they've gone total 2 inches, just enough to get the line of fire onto my infantry there. I declare BS attack, and my opponent declares BS attack. Okay, so the range is greater than 16 but less than 24. Our respective BS, range modifiers, cover modifiers, and success values. So I'm rolling on flats, my opponent is rolling on 4 or less. Okay, my opponent fails because all of their rolls are above 4. I succeed with a 5. So once again, our opponent's going to make a save. They roll a 1. I automatically know this is going to be a fail. gives them a total of 5. 5 is definitely a lot lower than 14, which is very unlucky. So that miniature now becomes unconscious. Now, although the opponent is most likely in loss of lieutenant, it doesn't really make a difference for this turn. It's only for the next turn, but this actually turns out to be the last turn in the game. So spending the last regular order, opponent declares move, and they just declare their Volcolot to stand up, which is actually a bad idea because now I declare BS attack, BS attack, BS attack, and dodge. So these 3 up here are all going to shoot back at this heavy infantry, and my lieutenant down here is going to dodge because the range bands are more favorable for the HMG and not for me. So I don't want to lose my lieutenant in case I do happen to get the next turn. So as you can see, those 3 shoot back, and my opponent, because the HMG has 4 bursts, decides to split all 4 shots amongst all 4 miniatures. Okay, so obviously this all happens, at the same time, face to face, but I'm going to do it one after the other because that's how we eventually sorted out the rolls. So the first face to face roll is between both heavy infantry, and the range is less than 8 inches. Again, our ballistic skill, range modifiers, cover modifiers, success values. So I'm succeeding on a 10 or less, my opponent on a 6 or less. Now, lo and behold, I score a crit. I score exactly 10. So if you score the exact same amount as your success value, that's called a critical. And so that means when it comes to the save roll, my opponent has to make an extra armor save roll. So 2 armor saves. Okay, we sort out the next face-to-face roll. Again, the range is greater than 8. I know it doesn't look like it here on the photo, but it actually does on the day. Relevant ballistic skill, range modifier, cover modifier, and success value. So I'm rolling on flats, my opponent is rolling on 9s. I get a 1, so I succeed. My opponent misses with an 18. So that's another save my opponent has to do. So that's 3 in total. Next face-to-face roll, it's less than 8 inches. It actually turns out to be exactly 8 inches. So it's 8 inches or less for the range modification. So the range modifier, cover, and the save, I'm again rolling on flats. My opponent is rolling on 6 or less this time. And we both fail. And the final roll, the range is greater than 8 inches, but less than 16. I think it was like 15.5 inches or something. So I'm just rolling against my physical of 10. My opponent has a ballistic skill of 12. So they add their range and cover modifiers. And so I'm rolling on flat 10, and they're rolling on a 9. Now they miss, so my opponent had a very unlucky turn this turn, and I managed to succeed on a 3. So I move into total cover by going prone and outside of line of fire. Okay, so now it's time for the armor saves for my opponent. Sorry, the save roll for my opponent. So we'll do the first one, which is the evader, the one where I got the critical. So the damage of the weapon is 14. They have to roll 2 dice because the critical, normally it would be 1 dice, but because it's a critical, they have to roll an additional armor save. So they roll 16, which is higher than 14, so that's an automatic success. However, they also roll a 5. So adding their armor of 4, cover of +3, because a total save of 12. Again, just short of 14. So my opponent takes 1 wound. And for the second success, which was with this Aguasil, again another armor roll, 19, automatically higher than 13, so it's a save. So out of the 3 bullet hits, only 1 was managed to be successful and to cause a wound. So my opponent goes unconscious. And that's the end of the game. Okay, so what was demonstrated here in this game, in this tutorial, obviously camouflage, moving around the battlefield, and especially re-camouflaging as an entire order, which can only be done without any enemy line of fire. Never got a chance to use the MSVs, but hopefully they'll be used in the further tutorials. And didn't really get a chance to use Discover either, but hopefully that'll be used in future tutorials. But we explained this at the beginning, so hopefully you'll have an understanding of the mechanic. And that's it. So thank you for watching, and I'll look forward to providing tutorial 4 in the future. Okay, thank you very much.